director of our Nizami program here at Tarbiyya Institute. And on behalf of everyone here at Tarbiyya, I want to warmly welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very, very timely and crucial workshop with our renowned psychologist here, Dr. Leonard Sachs. I'm so excited that we were able to have Dr. Sachs join us, all the way from Pennsylvania. Originally, we had planned, we've actually been working on this event since like February or March. A special shout out to brothers Payam, brother Abdul Qadir, brother Jeff, and brother Haroon for initiating the contact with Dr. Sachs and for, starting this whole process way back in February before COVID. So we were planning to have this event in September in person at Tarbiyya in California. Of course, COVID happened, and so now we had to switch everything online virtually. Dr. Sachs has been amazing working with us on that. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise because now we're able to host so many of you. I mean, I think we have registrations from all across the United States. We have people who are Muslim, people who are not Muslim. So welcome to all of you. I'm really, really, really glad that all of you are here. So really, I think this pandemic has taken a toll on all of us, every member of the family, every member of the community. Many of us here are parents, and parenting was already so hard, right? It's really not easy to be a parent. The pandemic has really exacerbated that for most parents. And we're already managing so much, and it's been especially difficult also for our children. I see the effects of not being able to go to school, of not seeing their friends, even in my 3-year-old. I think we can take all the help that we can get. I'm really glad that we're here with Dr. Sachs so that we can learn. He has some amazing recent evidence-based research to share with us about how the pandemic has affected us as families, as our children, and how to, and present some solutions for that as well. So let me just check in and see if Dr. Aziz was able to join. And if not, Dr. Sachs, if it's all right, I'll go ahead and introduce you, and then we can go ahead and get started.
Absolutely.
Let me go ahead and do that then. Yeah, I don't think he's here yet, but we'll catch up with him later. So Dr. Leonard Sachs, he has an MD and a PhD. He attended public schools in Sugar Heights, Ohio, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. He attended the Massachusetts Institute, just a second, sorry. Sorry, lost my place, everybody. So he enrolled in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Massachusetts, and he graduated from there, Phi Beta Kappa, in 1980 at the age of 19. Wow, that's amazing. He also then went on to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned both a PhD in psychology and an MD. Dr. Sachs is a psychologist and family physician with more than 30 years of clinical experience. He has also led more than 460 events around the world, not just in the United States, and spoken on issues of child and adolescent development. He's visited and worked with more than 400 schools and universities, juvenile justice facilities, communities of faith, and all sorts of schools from pre-K, nursery schools, everywhere, corporations, community groups, and parent groups. So he's really helped so many different people. And he's appeared in the Today Show, CNN, National Public Radio, PBS, Fox News, among so many other news corporations and media outlets. He's also authored 4 books on the subject of child development and adolescent psychology, including the New York Times bestseller, The Collapse of Parenting. And today, Dr. Sachs is here with us to speak specifically about the challenges posed by the pandemic with evidence-based guidelines for improving outcomes in teens and adolescents. So thank you so much, Dr. Sachs, for being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for your introduction. I also wanted to mention to everybody that I am the medical director of an urgent care facility here in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia. and that we have now diagnosed more than 140 cases of coronavirus in people who are sick with the virus. That was the latest count as of 2 days ago. And I think you'll see why that's relevant. As Sayre mentioned, I have written 4 books, and I prepared a handout for you. You don't need the handout right now, and I'll show you this link again, but I want you to be aware that there's a handout, because I'm going to be rattling off a lot of numbers, a lot of studies. Those numbers and those studies are all in your handout, so you don't need to be scribbling notes. The handout is 12 pages. It's got all the links and all the numbers in it, and I will show you this link again. So we're going to talk about evidence for best practices for parenting during this pandemic. And all my presentations are always grounded in evidence. So let's begin with what I think is some relevant evidence. The Centers for Disease Control has been monitoring anxiety among Americans roughly twice a year for many years. Typically, they'll try to survey a large and demographically representative sample of Americans, at least 70,000 individuals in each cycle. But in April of this year, because of the pandemic, they decided to step up that monitoring frequency from twice a year to every week. Looking at adults as young as 18 years of age to adults over 80 years of age. And they also published a baseline, so we have something to compare to. So a year and a half ago, before the pandemic, about 8% of American adults reported significant impairment due to feeling anxious, unable to concentrate or focus, can't get to sleep at night, so anxious that it's really impairing activities of daily life. And then the most recent survey, July 21st, 36% of adults overall. So clearly a quadrupling overall. But let's break that data down a little bit, because they provide the results broken down by age. And as you can see, it's the youngest adults who are most effective. There's a continuous decline as a function of age. The oldest adults are least likely to be anxious. The youngest adults are most likely to be anxious. Unfortunately, the CDC discontinued the study. The data from July 21st are the last we will get. But as of July 21st, more than 62% of the youngest Americans 18 years of age now report being anxious or depressed or both. It's a pretty clear message that anxiety has risen markedly among Americans since the beginning of the pandemic. And the younger you are, the greater the risk that you are experiencing anxiety. And we have data from other researchers and other sources, Jean Twenge in San Diego and others, showing that adolescents are even more affected than young adults. Why? And what can you do about it? That's kind of where I want to begin. Why the rise in anxiety? Well, the short answer is uncertainty. Humans don't like uncertainty. Well, by uncertainty, I mean, what's the risk that something bad is going to happen to me? Now, we have 50 years of research going back to Marty Seligman, one of my professors when I was earning my doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania, showing that under certain situations, anxiety can be energizing if you can control it. But if it's uncontrollable, if there's nothing you feel that you can do about it, nothing you do is going to make a difference, then bad things happen. Cortisol levels rise, immune function declines, anxiety rises. Now, the older you are, the lower the uncertainty. If you're 50 years old, you know your prospects. You, in most cases, have some kind of career behind you. You know where you are. You know more or less where you stand. You've completed your education, I hope. So there's less uncertainty. You know what your job is in most cases, if you have a job. Likewise, if you're 80, your life is mostly behind you. So the uncertainty about what comes next, well, most of your life is behind you. Now, we all know that the actual risk of death from the coronavirus is greater for an 80-year-old than for a 50-year-old, and greater for a 50-year-old than for a 20-year-old. But the anxiety doesn't seem to be primarily about the risk of death. The anxiety is about the uncertainty that you face. And the younger you are, from adolescence onward, the greater the uncertainty. So that's, I think, a good place for us to start today, that there has clearly been an explosion in anxiety among Americans, that rise in anxiety is greater for the youngest Americans. And now we can start thinking about, okay, what can we do about it? To get a perspective on best practice in that regard, I think it's helpful to go back 50 years or more to the work of Professor James Coleman. James Coleman was a researcher at Johns Hopkins, but he traveled across the United States. He and his research team interviewed high school kids across this country and asked them structured questions in a structured interview. One of the questions they always asked was, if all your friends wanted you to join a particular club, but one of your parents did not approve, would you still join? And back in the 1960s, the great majority of high school kids told Dr. Coleman they would not join because the opinion of their parents mattered more to them than the combined opinion of all their peers. Parents mattered more than peers in that era. Between 2011 and 2019, I posed a similar question to middle school and high school kids across the United States, an updated version of Professor Coleman's question. I asked them, if all your friends wanted you to sign up for a particular social media app, would you consult your parents first? And the most common answer I got from American kids was not yes, was not no, it was laughter. They burst out laughing. As one girl said to me, she said, my parents would think TikTok is some kind of, I don't know, grandfather clock. Why would I ask them? Now, these kids may say they love their parents, and maybe they do, but they care more about what their same age peers think than what their parents think. That's a big change, and that matters. Because most cultures have been characterized by strong attachments across generations. But today, researchers find that the primary attachment of American children and teens is to their same age peers. The relationship they care about most is the relationship they have with their same age peers. And that's a huge change because good parents offer unconditional attachment, but same age peers don't. Good parents nurture, but same age peers generally can't. Good parents sacrifice for their kids without expecting anything in return, but same age peers rarely do so for their friends. So that's my daughter, Sarah, who made a cameo just before we started. Suppose she were to say to me, I hate you. I'm never going to talk to you ever again as long as I live. She never said that, but let's imagine for a moment that she did. What would happen? Well, her mother and I would discuss and decide what privileges she would lose and for how long as a result of that outburst. But nothing fundamental would change. She would not lose her place in our home. We would not stop loving her. There's nothing that she could do or say that would cause us to stop loving her. And she knows that. And we are her primary attachment. So she can relax. She knows that no matter what, that foundation will not be moved. But suppose she were to say those same words to a friend at school. I hate you. I'm never going to talk to you ever again as long as I live. Well, that friendship is over, or it is at least badly damaged. Peer relations are contingent and ephemeral, which is a fancy way of saying they can change. They can change overnight. You want to see an American teenage girl have a total meltdown? It's very simple. Here's what you do. You take her phone from her without warning, and she will totally freak out because she'll be like, Vanessa doesn't know I don't have my phone. What happens if she texts me and I don't answer? She's going to think I'm ignoring her. She's going to think I don't like her. You can go from being the most popular girl to being the odd girl out in one day, in 5 minutes. So all these kids are staring at their phone because, God forbid, you miss a text. So I have visited schools not only across the United States, but around the world. And some years back, I visited an independent school in Perth in Western Australia, which has a beautiful green lawn at the main entrance, green lawn stretching down to the Indian Ocean, looking west. And the teacher I was speaking to has been at that school for close to 30 years. And it has always been her custom to take her lunch on this beautiful lawn. And she told me that 10 years ago, kids would often sit with her at lunch. And she told me how 10 years ago, a girl sat with her. It was just her and the girl confided in her that her boyfriend was making eyes at another girl. And she was worried that her boyfriend was more interested in this other girl. And the teacher said, don't worry about him. He's 15 years old. A 15-year-old boy is not really human yet. Don't worry about them. That's not important. Wait 10 or 15 years. Then the boys are a little more worth your time and effort. But don't worry about what some 15-year-old boy thinks. Don't lose any sleep over that. Doesn't matter. That's a very useful grown-up perspective. What's the first prerequisite for being a good counselor? You don't have to have a degree necessarily, but a good counselor must offer different experience and a different perspective. In order to be effective as a counselor, you must offer your client a different perspective based on different experience. This teacher doesn't have a degree in counseling, but she's an adult woman. She has more experience, different experience, and a different perspective. And so she can wisely counsel this girl. Don't get all upset about what some 15-year-old boy thinks. It's not that important. That's very useful. But this teacher told me that the girls don't sit with her anymore. They don't confide with her anymore. They're confiding in other girls. They're looking at their phones. And it's not just this teacher. This has been well documented in the United States, especially, the breaking of bonds across generations. Kids are no longer routinely confiding in adults, parents, teachers, or other grown-ups. They are confiding in one another. They're posting stuff online. That's a big change. So as this teacher suggested to me, suppose that a similar girl today had a similar concern. Adolescent life hasn't changed. But instead of confiding her concern in an adult, she's now asking another girl, a same age peer. This other girl may be the nicest girl in the world, may have a heart of gold, but she is incompetent to serve as a counselor because she doesn't have different experience. She doesn't have a different perspective. They both think this boy is cute. They both care what he thinks. So the one girl asks the other girl, hey, I think he's making eyes at another girl. And the other girl says, OMG, because they're texting, I saw him at the party and he went into the bedroom with that other girl. And when they came out, their clothes were all messed up. And now the first girl's like, oh my gosh, it's totally true. He's going to dump me. They're spiraling into a positive feedback loop. Talking about it isn't making it better. Talking about it's making it worse. And neither of them have any insight, any awareness that talking about it is making this worse. Psychologists have coined a new term just in the past 10 years, a new term, co-rumination. It's a little older than 10 years, but it's pretty new. Co-rumination, the term psychologists now use to describe this positive feedback loop when teens, instead of confiding in adults, now confide in other teens. Now, psychologists have known for at least 10 years that social media and the cell phone are driving co-rumination. We have lots of research from California and across the United States showing that the coronavirus is causing teens to spend significantly more time online. So one teen says, hey, I hear that all sports are canceled this fall because of the pandemic. Another teen says, yeah, nobody's going to get any Division I scholarships. No D1 scouts means no D1 scholarships. And a third teen is now totally freaking out. Now, a grown-up could offer a different perspective and tone things down. But teens do not excel at toning things down. So I'm a family doctor. I'm director of an urgent care facility. I can tell you when I see a teenager or a younger kid, I can tell within 2 minutes whether this kid's primary attachment is to their own parent or to a same age peer. And incidentally, I'd like to postpone questions to the end if we may, because a lot of your questions I have learned I will answer in the course of the presentation. So I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till then, and we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. I can tell within 2 minutes where this kid's primary attachment lies. If a kid comes in and they are thriving and they are making good eye contact and they're smiling and they're talking about what's going on, I guarantee you that kid's primary attachment is to their parents. And pandemic, shutting things down, no problem. They enjoy spending time with their parents. They're doing great. That's unusual. It happens, I see it, but it's unusual. What is much more common among the kids I see is kids who are sullen, resentful, unhappy, because their primary attachment is to other kids their own age. And their favorite thing is hanging out with other kids their own age. And those interactions are now limited face to face. Those kids are upset. They feel the world is unfair. They're happy when they can be online with their peers. But when you try to limit those interactions, they are grumpy, they're sullen and withdrawn. So I do think we have sufficient evidence now, based on research and data published in the past weeks and months, that we can now confidently recommend that parents prioritize the family. Prioritize the family over same age peers who are outside the household. Cancel the play date. Make a family date instead. Limit how much time your kid is spending on social media. We're going to talk in some detail in just a few minutes about exactly what the guidelines should be based on the evidence. Try to restore those bonds across generations, which were much stronger a generation ago. Encourage your kid to confide in you. It may not happen overnight if those bonds have been broken, but keep asking open-ended questions. What's on your mind? What you thinking about? What are you worried about? What do you see happening down the road? Open-ended questions, not yes/no questions. And restore that solid foundation. I will always be here for you. I am your parent. You can always count on me. That will never change. Offer a grown-up perspective. A lot of kids are freaking out. You need to offer that grown-up perspective. Look, you don't have cancer. You are not hungry and homeless on the street. You are unlikely to die from the virus. Yeah, I get it. This is a major inconvenience. A lot of plans and dreams have been destroyed. You didn't get to be on the football team. You didn't get to perform live at the recital. That's a shame. I'm not minimizing that, but let's put this in perspective. You are inconvenienced. I'm hearing from some parents who are saying, hey, if there is any chance that my kid might get sick, then they're not leaving the house. I think that's unwise. I want to now put in a different perspective. So I mentioned that I have visited schools worldwide. My one foreign language, the one and only language I'm fluent in besides English, is German. And so I have visited schools in Germany and in German-speaking Switzerland. And I've had a particular interest in Waldkindergarten. A Waldkindergarten means literally a forest kindergarten, a kindergarten that is outdoors, that has no building, no classroom. The kids are outdoors every day, all day long. And these are children 3, 4, 5, 6 years of age. And as an American visiting these, it can be quite a shock because that's a real saw that 4-year-old is using. This would be most unusual in the United States. So I visited a Waldkindergarten in Oberammergau in Bavaria 1 year ago, and I took this video. And he is using a sharp knife to whittle a stick. And all the kids are doing this. He's about to be joined by another 4-year-old girl who's getting out her sharp knife. And she is going to whittle a stick. That would be very unusual in the United States. And I got all these pictures of these 4- and 5-year-olds climbing these tall trees with no grown-ups around in the Bavarian forest. This is not a structured playground, using sharp knives to cut wood. So Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff have written about what they call the culture of safetyism. What they mean by the culture of safetyism is the belief that if any kid might get hurt, then no child can participate. Don't do that, you might get hurt. And the result, as these and other scholars have shown, is kids who are risk averse, kids who are afraid to take risks. And also parents and teachers who are risk averse. If a child has spent their early years climbing trees and cutting wood with sharp knives, they have learned, yeah, I might get hurt, but I can handle that. I am not afraid. I have a photograph of my own daughter. When she was very young, she was at the top of a jungle gym and fell 9 foot onto the ground and sustained a non-displaced fracture of her distal radius. And I have a photograph of her with her cast on, which I applied, admiring her cast, admiring my handiwork. And I think that was a great experience for her because she learned, yeah, I might get hurt, but I'm not afraid. I can do a 9-foot jungle gym, not a 50-foot jungle gym because then I might die, but a 9-foot jungle gym I can handle. Learning to judge risk is what childhood play ought to be about. And you know, as a family doctor, I've had so many parents, and in urgent care, very often, I see a child who is injured and the parents are furious. They're like, my kid fell and sprained their ankle. I'm like, yeah, okay. She's gonna be fine. I'm gonna teach you how to care for her ankle and ensure 100% healing. But you know what? If your kid goes through childhood and never sprains an ankle, that's not a good thing. Ellen Sensater and her colleagues in Europe have found that kids who have had those appropriately dangerous experiences, climbing a tree, cutting a piece of wood with a knife, the term they use is antiphobic. These kids subsequently are less likely to be afraid. You don't want to raise a child who is fearful. You want to raise a child who can judge risk and who has the courage to take appropriate risk. American kids increasingly are reared in this culture of safetyism. Don't do that, you might get hurt. And they're staying home and playing games in their bedroom. That's not a good thing. The culture of safetyism, the idea that if any kid might get hurt, then no child should participate. The result of that child is kids who are risk averse, kids who are afraid to venture out. As I mentioned earlier, I am medical director of a facility where we have diagnosed over 140 proven cases of coronavirus, COVID-19. I will share something personal with you. I'm 60 years old. I am overweight and I have high blood pressure. That's 4 major risk factors for bad outcomes if I should get sick with the coronavirus, which I have not yet had. Age over 50, male rather than female, overweight, high blood pressure, 4 major risk factors. But I go to work every day that I'm scheduled to work, and I work full time. I wear appropriate personal protective equipment. I wear a mask. My daughter's school is open with appropriate social distancing. The kids and teachers wear masks, and it's a small class size, but I concur and accept their decision, and I've spoken with the leadership of the school, and they are well aware of all the risks, and they are very careful to ensure safety to the extent that it is possible. But the goal of 100% safety is not a reasonable goal. If you insist on 100% safety, you would never leave your home. There's risk in driving a car. Look, I'm hearing from some parents who say if there's any possibility my kid might get sick, then my kid's not leaving home. Life is all about judging risks and benefits. If you insist on 100% safety, if you say to your kid, no, you're not allowed to do that because you might get sick, you are raising a fearful and risk-averse child. Don't do that. You want to teach your child to have courage. Courage doesn't mean that you ignore the risk. I do not ignore the risk. I'm a practicing physician. I have seen this disease, this COVID-19. I recognize the risk, I prepare for the risk, and I move forward. To quote the old saying, there is no courage without fear, but you can't let your fear drive out your courage. You must be the role model. You are the first teacher of good behavior, of virtue, and that includes the virtue of courage. We're going to talk more about that. But let's take a few minutes now to talk about social media. I mentioned before that you must limit your kids' involvement with social media. Well, what exactly does that mean? How many minutes a day? We have evidence. My guidelines are evidence-based. So let's now consider that evidence and try to arrive at those guidelines. But I think it's important first to recognize how quickly this has all happened. Next month, Instagram will celebrate its 10th anniversary, barely 10 years old. And yet, according to Nielsen, more than half of American girls are now on Instagram at 12 years of age. Instagram is now a huge part of the lived experience of many adolescent girls in this country, and it didn't exist 10 years ago. This has happened quickly. To understand why that matters, and why it matters for girls more than it matters for boys, I want you to imagine a girl living in ancient times. By ancient times, I mean the year 2000, 20 years ago. It's the evening. She's writing in her diary, by which I mean she's writing with a pen in a bound volume of blank pages. She's writing about who she likes, who she doesn't like, what her dreams are, what her goals are, what she really wants out of life. She might write 5 pages in an evening. She's not going to show that to anybody. If she's got a younger brother, she'll keep it under lock and key. But she's doing some very important work. She's figuring out, who am I? And what do I really want? That's important work. The great American psychologist, Dr. Abraham Maslow, said that figuring out what you want is not trivial. He believed that most grown-ups hadn't figured it out. And so they're miserable because they're working hard at jobs they don't like in pursuit of goals that are not meaningful to them. So this girl writing 5 pages about what I really want. She's doing some important work. Fast forward to today. When I meet with middle school kids or high school kids, I'll often ask them, who's on Instagram? Almost all the hands go up. Who's on TikTok? Most of the hands go up. Who has a diary? Almost no hands. 20 years ago, the majority, more than half of American teenage girls had a diary that they wrote in. Today, that number appears to be less than 5%. Very few kids write in diaries anymore. They're too busy. They're posting on social media. So then I'll ask, what's the difference between posting on social media and writing in a diary? When researchers look to see how are American kids using Instagram, they don't find any 5-page essays about what I want out of life. That's not how kids use Instagram. They're using Instagram and other social media. American kids use social media to share photos and cute little captions with their photos. And this is true for girls and it's true for boys. But it turns out that girls and boys use social media differently. A girl and a boy both go to the football game and they both take pictures at the game. But the boy is taking a picture of the game or the pretty cheerleader at the game. The girl is turning the phone on herself and taking 100 selfies at the game. And then that evening she's going through the 100 selfies and she's finding 2 or 3 where she's laughing and the kids around her are laughing, and that's what she posts on her Instagram. Here I am at the game, we had a great time. And girls post 5 times as many photos as boys do on average. The difference between writing in a diary and posting on Instagram is the difference between living and performing. The diary is about living. It's about figuring out what you want, who you are. Social media, as used by American children and teens, is a performance. Now, there's nothing wrong with a performance. A performance is a show that you put on to entertain or amuse other people, and I don't see anything wrong with that, as long as you realize that the performance will have to come to an end, and you will take off your mask and resume your real life. My concern, listening to American girls, is that many of them are trapped in what I've come to call the cyber bubble of 24/7 texting and social media. And it is exhausting and it is draining. These girls are hyper connected to other kids their own age, but disconnected from themselves. Disconnected from themselves. So we now have good research from longitudinal cohort studies showing that the more time a teen spends on social media like Instagram, the more likely that teen is to become depressed. So here's one of those studies, and the link to the full text is in your handout. So this is a longitudinal cohort study in which researchers followed a group of American teens over time and found that the more time kids were spending on Instagram looking at other kids' Instagram, or looking to see how many likes they got on their own Instagram, the more likely that teen was to become depressed. And this is true for boys, the dashed line, but it is even more true for girls. It was a much bigger effect for girls than it was for boys. And we now have many such studies. This is a robust finding, meaning that multiple different researchers looking at different cohorts have come to the same conclusion, that the more time kids spend on Instagram and other social media like Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed, and that effect is bigger for girls than it is for boys. That is a robust empirical finding. Why the gender difference? We get one insight from Carol Dweck and her colleagues at Stanford, who in another study found that girls are very ready to believe that other girls are having more fun than they are, that other girls' lives are more interesting than their own life is. This turns out to be not at all true for boys. Turns out that boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to other people. And girls use social media differently than boys do. So a boy and a girl both get sick. They both throw up. The boy posts a photo of his own vomit on his Instagram. Girls never do that. Boys post a much wider range of their lived experience. The dead dog, the vomit. Girls don't do that. Girls post the fun stuff, the happy stuff. Now imagine a girl, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, in her bedroom looking at the other girl's Instagram. There's Sonia at the football game. She's having a great time. There's Vanessa with her new puppy. Isn't it cute? I'm just sitting there not doing anything. My life sucks. The more time kids spend on Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed. That effect is bigger for girls than it is for boys. And you now understand 3 mechanisms that drive that difference between girls and boys in consequences of social media. One is that girls are more invested in their posts than boys are. If you don't like Jake's photo of the pretty cheerleader, he doesn't care. But if you don't like Sonia's photo of Sonia, she's going to take it more personally. And remember, girls post 5 times as many photos as boys do. So girls are more invested in social media than boys are. Boys are more invested in video games. We'll get to that in a minute. Girls are posting mostly the fun stuff, happy stuff. This boy looking at Jake's vomit or Brett's dead dog is unlikely to want to be Jake or Brett. But girls aren't seeing the vomit or the dead dog. They're seeing the fun stuff, the happy stuff. And boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to begin with. So boys are, to some degree, on average, protected against the most toxic effects of social media. On average. Girls are, on average, more vulnerable. Boys, as we'll see in a moment, are more vulnerable to the addictive properties of video games. We'll get to that. So what can you do about it? Well, first step is to recognize that most 14-year-olds are not masters of time management. So in one study, they asked this girl, how much time were you on Instagram last night? She said, 40 minutes. Actually, it was more than 2 hours. But I don't think she was lying. I think she lost track of time. This is your job. It is your job to help your teen establish good habits. You must limit, govern, and guide what your teen is doing online. And the good news is that there are lots of apps out there that make this job very easy. And I've devoted a page of your handout. Your handout is 12 pages. One of those 12 pages is devoted to all the different apps and recommendations I have. I have no affiliation with any manufacturer of apps. But you must install some app on your kid's phone. And the first thing the app will do, and on all their devices, the first thing the app will do is show you what sites your kid is visiting. I am not advocating a complete ban on social media. I don't believe that the evidence warrants a complete ban. If you want to impose a complete ban, I'm not going to say no. You're going to need a lot of courage. The evidence does, however, support that you limit how much time your kid spends on social media. 20 minutes a day is fine. 30 minutes a day is fine. 2 hours a day is too much. I'll show you how we know that in just a moment. These apps, every one of the apps that I list on your handout makes it very easy to do that. And you explain to your kid, hey, from now on, you're going to have a maximum of 40 minutes a day on all social media combined. And most of these apps will warn you, will warn the kid, they'll get a warning from the app saying, hey, you got 5 minutes left for Instagram today. So they can, answer their most urgent messages and get off. Don't hide this. Tell your kid, hey, my parents insisted on knowing where I was at all times. I have to know where you are at all times, except it's not out there. It's online. It's part of my job as your parent to limit and govern and guide what you're doing online. That's my job. I will know how much time you're spending. I'm going to limit how much time you spend. No more than 40 minutes a day on social media. Where does that figure come from? Well, it comes from the work of Jean Twenge, which, as many of you may know, she's the leading scholar looking quantitatively at time on social media and the risk that bad outcomes like anxiety and depression will result. So looking at big data, looking at thousands of kids. On the x-axis, you have time spent on social media. On the y-axis, you have bad outcomes like anxiety and depression. And what they find on that graph is no upswing until you get to about 40 minutes a day. At 40 minutes a day, you begin to see that graph going up. And it's pretty linear, maybe even parabolic. We can argue about whether the data supports a linear or quadratic fit. But clearly it starts to increase at 40 minutes and it just goes up and up and up and up and up after 40 minutes. An hour is worse than 40 minutes. 2 hours is worse than 1 hour. 3 hours is really bad. Now, again, I don't think the data allows us to say 39 minutes is fine and 41 minutes is too much. If you want to set the limit at 45 minutes, I'm not going to argue with you. If you're going to set the limit at 2 hours, I will argue with you. I think the evidence is very clear that anything substantially more than 45 minutes a day on social media is not good. Now, why? Why is there an inflection point at 40 minutes? And I've read the research, I've corresponded with the researchers, and it's something really interesting. What they're finding is that kids who are on social media 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, those kids are using social media to facilitate their actual social life in the real world. Again, kids don't send out engraved invitations anymore. They don't even really talk on the phone much to invite someone to a party. They are posting on social media. Let's all meet at so-and-so's house at 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon or 10 o'clock Saturday night. Those invitations now are going out on social media much more often for kids in this country than their telephone call or snail mail. Kids who are on social media for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, they're checking their invites. They're checking their messages. They're responding to their invites. They're responding to their messages. Beyond 40 minutes a day, though, that kid is not just responding to invites and messages. That kid is now a producer. They are producing video to entertain and amuse other kids. And when that's now your investment, producing video or other social media that now you're looking to see how many likes did you get, how many views did you get, and you put all this time into producing this video and you get nasty comments from anonymous people and not many views, you're going to be upset. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be disappointed. We all know about the kid who posted the video which went viral and they got 10 million views and now they're rich and famous. That's very rare. What is much more common is a kid puts lots of time and effort into posting something on social media and nothing happens. It fizzles, gets negative comments. That, I think, helps to explain the inflection point at 40 minutes a day. What are kids doing on social media? Especially if they're spending more than 40 minutes a day, they're producing, but they're also consuming American popular culture. So we need to spend a few minutes talking about some of the dangers of contemporary American popular culture. The big hit video last month was WAP, W-A-P. WAP. Cardi B created this song, this video, huge hit. #1 on Billboard. It is still #2 a month later. I cannot tell you what WAP stands for. I mean, I can, but my Muslim hosts have told me that many Muslim parents will be offended if I use bad language. And WAP is an acronym for vaginal lubrication using some very foul language. The song itself is a hymn to the mechanics of sexual intercourse, not to love or relationship. That's never mentioned. It is a song about vaginal lubrication and Kegel exercises and orgasm, with no real interest in who the partner is. It's about the mechanics of sexual intercourse. And it is a huge hit in this country right now at this moment. It broke the record for most streams, got 93 million streams. The video got 93 million streams in 1 week. That's a record. Made the #1 spot on Billboard's Top 100. It is still in the top #2 spot 1 month later. It is filled with profanity, none of which I can actually say out loud. The N word is there. The A word is there 15 times. The F word is there. Yes, it is. And it's gotten glowing reviews across American mainstream media. The New York Times reviewer was thrilled by the song's praise of female sexual desire. The Wall Street Journal praised this song, WAP, as a historic sign that women artists are making their mark. Another reviewer praised the song's promotion of sexual agency and empowerment of women, and that comment got 112,000 likes on Twitter. In your handout, you will find a link to my article that I wrote about WAP for public discourse, where you will find links to all the reviews in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Billboard, as well as my concerns. This is not a song or a video that you want your son or your daughter watching. Normally, when I talk about a video, I include a screenshot from the video. I cannot do that because this video is half-naked women gyrating in a provocative way. And I am concerned that some of you might be offended if I shared the video. In my article for public discourse, I include a link to the video that Cardi B has posted on YouTube. Cardi B is not the first. She is in a long succession of very successful American pop singers and artists and videos. Bruno Mars won 6 Grammys for his song, That's What I Like. There he is holding up his Grammy for Best Song for That's What I Like. So in his song, That's What I Like, he says, I got a condo in Manhattan, baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. So turn around and drop it for a player, drop it for me. He's offering money for sex. He's addressing a young woman he appears not to know. There's a screenshot from the video, which has had over 1.4 billion views. That's billion with a B as in Bruno. 1.4 billion views. Offers her lobster, then champagne, then diamonds, then a shopping spree in Paris, and finally offers just hand her his wallet if she will just turn around and drop it for a player, because that's what I like. Again, no mention of love or relationship. Just doing whatever Bruno Mars likes because that's what I like. And it got 6 Grammys. Money makes her smile, not love or courtesy or relationship. Money makes her smile. Imagine a young man in the workplace who approaches a female colleague and says, hey, baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. How about you turn around and drop it for a player, and offers her money? Well, he'd get in trouble. He might be fired. If he's lucky, he'll just be disciplined and be required to attend a workshop on sexual harassment where he will learn that addressing a young woman as you and your blank is objectification, that offering a female colleague money for sex is never permitted. But he might reasonably respond, hey, that's what Bruno Mars did in his song, and he got 6 Grammys, including the Grammy for Best Song. How is a young person supposed to know? if they have received no instruction, if they are immersed in a culture that prizes not love or relationship, but whatever floats your boat and the mechanics of sexual intercourse, which now characterizes a big chunk of American culture. Now, I said a big chunk. It is not universally true of American culture. American culture is not utterly depraved from one end to the other. I lead a workshop for schools and teachers titled Building a Culture of Respect. American kids are now immersed in a culture of disrespect, the culture of Akon, Eminem, Miley Cyrus, Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, Bruno Mars. That's a very toxic culture. You want to build a healthy culture, a culture of respect. How do you do that? Well, you need to find elements in contemporary American culture that these kids can relate to that are uplifting. Not everything Taylor Swift has done qualifies, but some of her songs do. Begin Again is a wonderful song with an uplifting message. Ed Sheeran, not everything Ed Sheeran has done is uplifting, but some of his songs are. Perfect being a great example of an uplifting song with a positive message about meaningful relationship. Chris Jansen has a song that I have found very useful and in talking to American teens, and that other teachers who work with American teens have told me is very useful. It's a song where he's talking about a young woman who's drunk. And he says, take a drunk girl home. Let her sleep all alone. Leave the hall lights on. Walk out and lock the door so she'll be safe inside. That's how she knows the difference between a boy and a man. Take a drunk girl home. A boy will molest a drunk girl. A man will take her home and make sure she's safe. I think that's a good message for American kids to get in a culture where they are immersed in messages that, hey, whatever floats your boat, if it feels good, do it. That's not a good message. That's the opening scene from Chris Jansen's video, where the young woman is clearly drunk. It's had 8 million views. So Bruno Mars' video, that's what I like, is about 150 times more popular in terms of the number of views. 150 views for Bruno Mars for every 1 view that Chris Jansen videos had. But there is good stuff in contemporary American culture. You don't have to lock it out completely. You do have to limit and govern and guide what kids are doing. And I don't endorse everything Chris Jansen does. He's got a song titled Power of Positive Drinking, which is in praise of binge drinking and getting drunk. That's not a good message. So you have to be mindful. You have to be careful. You can't just say no. You have to use your judgment. American popular culture is like a huge city. Now, in any huge city, there are some great things going on. There's a beautiful art museum. There's a wonderful science museum. There's a history museum where you can learn. But in any huge city, there's also high crime neighborhoods. There's drugs being dealt. You wouldn't let your kid loose to wander in a big city without adult guidance. That would be a dereliction of duty. Doesn't mean you don't ever let them go into the big city, but you limit and govern and guide where they go. That's part of your job as a parent. And the same is true of the online world. You have to teach good taste. As I wrote in my article for Public Discourse on Cardi B and WAP, W-A-P, what happened to good taste? This record-breaking song, WAP, is not in good taste. No child is born with good taste. No child is born knowing why Beethoven is great and Cardi B's song is not great. And if a kid, a child or teenager is immersed in a culture which from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times and everything in between is praising Cardi B and celebrating her as having achieved something great with her obscene and profane video, which it is. A culture that never mentions, or almost never mentions, Beethoven. Beethoven hasn't had a #1 hit on the Billboard Top 100 in a very long time. How is a child supposed to know? This is your job. You must teach your child to distinguish right from wrong, to distinguish art from trash. The popular culture of the United States will not do it. You must do it. You must limit, govern, and guide what your kid is doing with their devices. So that's my cue to talk about the mobile phone. Many American girls are going to bed with their phones switched on. And at 2 in the morning, your daughter's getting a text. OMG, did you see that amazing video by Cardi B? It is so awesome. Parents are amazed to find that half the ninth grade class is awake and texting at 2 in the morning. Look, the rules of good parenting have not changed in 20 years. But 20 years ago, a teenage girl could not accept a phone call at 2 in the morning because the phone would ring and the parents would not allow it because they knew it's more important for a kid to get a good night's sleep than to be up for an hour in the middle of the night exchanging texts. That was true 20 years ago, and it is just as true today. What has changed is the technology. It's now very easy for your daughter to accept that text at 2 in the morning because the phone never rang, it buzzed. She has her phone on vibrate mode, and she's not talking, she's texting. But just because she's texting, just because it's easy for her to do this without waking anybody up, doesn't mean it should happen. This is your job. At 9 o'clock at night, the very latest, you take the phone and you switch it off and you put it in the charger, which from now on will be in the parents' bedroom. She can have it back tomorrow morning. It is not reasonable to put this burden in the lap of your 14-year-old. What is your 14-year-old daughter supposed to say Monday morning in school when her friend says, or texts her and says, hey, I texted you last night at midnight. How come you didn't answer? Is your 14-year-old daughter supposed to say, well, researchers at Stanford have found that sleep deprivation in adolescence is a major risk factor in the etiology of anxiety and depression? That's ridiculous. You can't expect a 14-year-old to talk like that. You have to allow her to say, hey, my evil parents take my phone every night at 9. And then we'll have to have it back the next morning. This is your job. No devices in the bedroom. No phones in the bedroom. That's not just my opinion. Those are the official guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which state that child or teenager should have no unsupervised use of the internet. No expectation of privacy. The device should not be in the bedroom. It should be in the kitchen or living room or another public space where there is no expectation of privacy. It should not be doing anything online that they don't want their parents to see. That is unhealthy. That's not just my opinion. That's the official guideline of the American Academy, which spent 2 years formulating these guidelines with all the leading experts. Scholars define sexting as sending or receiving an obscene photo. They define obscene as the nipple of the female breast is exposed or the male or female genitalia is exposed. Sexting per se is unusual, but what has become very common in the United States is what some scholars call not quite sexting. That means taking a picture wearing lingerie or bikini and posting them on Instagram or sending them via Snapchat. That is now very common. Every study in the last 4 years have found that at least 50% of American girls 13 to 17 years of age has now engaged in this activity. Not quite sexting. Sarah Thomas, a researcher at Northwestern University in outside Chicago, Illinois, asked girls, why are you doing this? Why do you share these provocative selfies, these nude or half-nude, more often half-nude selfies with boys? And the girls said, well, because boys ask for them. And then Sarah Thomas asked, well, why do you do what the boys asked you to do? And the girls most often gave her one of two answers. They said, well, all the other girls are doing it. I don't want to be a prude. I don't want the other girls to think I'm a prude. I don't want the other boys to think I'm a prude. And the second answer Sarah Thomas found these girls giving was, why not? They don't know how or why to say no. No one has taught them that self-respect means you don't share half-nude photos with a device because they could show up anywhere. This boy says he's your boyfriend. A month from now, he might not be. And he still has the photos and he may post them and everyone will see them. And they will be out there forever and you cannot get them back. And the promise of a 15-year-old boy is not something to build your life on. Girls don't know that. They live in the United States. They're immersed in the culture of Cardi B and Bruno Mars. This is what all the cool girls are doing. What's your daughter supposed to say? I'm a lady of virtue. They didn't even know that. It would be a joke for an American girl to say such a thing. You have to allow them to say, I can't do that because my parents can see every photo I take with my device the moment I take it. And if they see anything inappropriate, I lose the device indefinitely. You have to allow them to blame you because girls are immersed in a toxic culture that is pushing them to share these photos. So I spoke to another Muslim Parents Association, and after my talk, Dr. Usra Hamzavi spoke with me. And she told me how other parents in her community, Muslim parents, say to her, oh, I didn't really need to come to this talk because my daughter would never do that. My daughter is very devout. She is Muslim. She wears a head covering. She would never. So Dr. Hamzavi wants her fellow Muslims to know. And she wrote the following for me to share with you. These are her words. The Islamic community is not exempt from these issues. Some aspects of digital media have become increasingly toxic for kids. Young people are not safeguarded just because they are Muslim. Parents must be knowledgeable and vigilant. Quote unquote from Dr. Usra Hamzavi. Another talk for a different Muslim group. Same thing happened. Another Muslim psychiatrist approached me and she said, I want you to tell Muslim parents, being Muslim does not protect your child from American culture. If your child lives in the United States and they have an internet-enabled device, a phone or an iPad or a laptop, you must be careful. Being Muslim does not protect your child. You, the parent, must protect your child. You must be aware and protect your children. So I was visiting a very fine private school, very well regarded, and rightly so. It is a very fine school. Co-ed school, K through 12. 12-year-old girl had a 14-year-old boyfriend. He asked her to send him some pictures. Nothing raunchy. He just wanted to see her take off her school uniform blouse and skirt to reveal bra and panties. That's all, he said. Of course, she knew her parents would never allow this, so she went into her bedroom, closed the door, locked the door, and did as he had asked, and sent him the photos using Snapchat. Snapchat claims that you can take a photo and send that photo using, say, a 5-second self-destruct. And Snapchat claims that when the recipient gets the photo, if they try to save it with a screenshot, you, the sender, will be notified. She believed that claim. She took the photos and sent the photos to him. Snapchat is lying. They are deliberately saying something they know to be false. They know that there are many free apps out there that allow you to save any photo, any video sent via Snapchat without the sender being notified. This boy, like most boys, knew about this. This girl, like most girls, did not. The girls don't want to save the boys' photos. The boys want to save the girls' photos. He saved all the pictures on his device, on his phone. School administrators later determined he did not intend for anyone else to see them. But he was at a party, and he set his phone down. For a second. He set his phone down for a second, turned his back to grab some chips and talk to some friends. He had his back turned on his phone. Another boy came along, saw the phone, picked up the phone. Lock screen had not yet engaged. Scrolled to the gallery. Found this girl's photos, forwarded each of the photos to his own phone, exited the gallery, went back to the home screen, set the phone down exactly where he'd found it. First boy didn't know anything had happened. Second boy then posted all of the photos from this girl on his own Instagram. Within 3 days, everyone at the school had seen them. Boys this girl did not even know were coming up to her at school saying, "Hey, Emily, how about you put on a striptease for us?" She had been invited to a 3-day all-girls ski weekend. The birthday girl, the girl whose parents were hosting the ski weekend and who were paying for the bus to drive the girls to the mountain, to the resort, paying for lodging at the resort, paying for lift tickets. The birthday girl called up this girl and said, I hate to make this phone call, but my mom is totally freaking out because all the other moms are freaking out and saying that if you're going to be there, they won't let their daughter come because they now think you're some kind of bad influence. So I have to uninvite you. I'm really sorry. I have to uninvite you. This girl had a meltdown. She had no psychiatric history. She'd always done well, had lots of friends. She was hysterical, refusing to go to school, nonstop, endless sobbing, saying her life was over. The photos would always be out there, which is absolutely true. Dozens of other boys had picked up the photos and reposted them. She'll never get them down. They're still up there, or so I've been told. Refusing to go to school, cutting herself with razor blades. Parents took her to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed depression and prescribed Lexapro 10 milligrams. That accomplished nothing. She now have a 12-year-old girl with no previous psychiatric history who is sobbing, saying her life is over, she wants to die, depression, not responding to counseling or medication. Who's at fault? The girl? Her boyfriend? The other boy? No, they're kids. The parents are to blame. Look, a modern smartphone is a very powerful device. With that device, you can take a photo and send the photo, and once that photo is sent, you have no control over what happens to it. That's a very adult capability. To put such a device in the hands of a child is like putting a child behind the wheel of a sports car with no driver ed. If you're going to give such a device to a child, then you are responsible for every photo they take and everything that happens to that photo. So I wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal making this point. Link is in your handout. Your job is to be the parent. And again, so many American parents are confused. They want to be the best friend. I've talked to American parents who will literally come right out and say, my job is to be my kid's best friend. Wrong. That's not your job. A friend is a peer. A friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, I will not permit you to pig out on ice cream right before supper. That's the job of the parent. Look, there's any number of kids out there who can be your kid's best friend. But only you can be the parent. I'm not saying you can't have fun with your kid. On the contrary, I devote a chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to the importance of having fun with your kid and how you must plan and schedule that, because we're all busy. And again, when researchers look at how American parents are spending time with their kid, they're helping them do their homework. That doesn't count. That's not fun. I devote a chapter titled Enjoy. Enjoy. How do you do that? How do you structure that time? Most of the time you spend with your kids should be spent doing fun stuff. If you're just the disciplinarian, it will not work. Again, the collapse of parenting is all about understanding that balance, which American parents did understand a generation ago, but many of them have forgotten. They now want to be their kid's best friend. I'm gonna interrupt myself because there's a story I think is really important here that I want to share. As you know, I'm a family doctor. I've been a medical doctor for a long time. And over my career, I have occasionally been involved as attending physician in a handful of cases of sexual assault in which a girl, and it was always a girl, was sexually assaulted by young men. In one of those cases, I recall, I got a phone call in the middle of the night from Shady Grove Adventist Hospital in Rockville, Maryland, where I was attending physician. But the ER didn't want me to come in to admit this girl. This is a 15-year-old girl who had been a victim of sexual assault. They had another doctor who was going to admit the patient. Mom had asked that I come in. I'd known Mom and this girl for many years. And Mom asked if I would just come in, please, and sit with her and explain to her what was going on, because I was a familiar face in a sea of strangers. So I did. Drove into the hospital in the middle of the night and met with Mom in the consultation room. It was just her and me. And when I walked in, the first thing this mom said to me, she said, I knew I shouldn't have let her go. It was a frat party at the college. She's 15 years old. I knew I shouldn't have let her go. And you want to shake this mom and say, well, then why'd you let her go? But I didn't do that because I already knew the answer. She wants to be her daughter's best friend. And a friend cannot prohibit. Better illustration of good parenting comes from a mom I was talking to in Tampa, Florida, when I was speaking to parents down there. And her daughter came to her and said, hey, guess what? We're all going to Cancun for spring break. And Mom looked at her calendar and said, well, I can't get away that weekend. I'm busy. And her daughter said, I didn't say you're going to Cancun. We're going. Me and all the girls, we're going to Cancun for spring break. No parents. And her mom said, wait, Cancun, Mexico? That's where American college kids go for spring break, and you're 14, but you could easily pass for 18, and I don't think some young man is going to ask for ID. I don't think it's safe. And her daughter said, oh, it's totally fine. It'd be totally safe. We'll keep together. We'll have our phones. It's fine. And her mom said, no, I'm sorry. You're not going. And she told me her daughter exploded and started screaming at her. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. You're going to totally ruin my whole life. And Mom responded, well, to be honest, sometimes I'm not so fond of you either. But I'm your parent, and that's a job. Like all jobs, it has a job description. And item 1 in my job description is I have to keep you safe. And I know more than you do about the behavior of drunk young men, and you are not going. If you're doing your job as a parent, there will be times that your child or teen gets very angry with you. Part of your job. It's not your job to be the best friend. If you are playing the role of best friend, you are putting your child at risk. It is your job to be the parent. You must install parental monitoring apps on your kid's phone. And I find that some parents are skeptical of these apps. And some parents will say, oh, come on, that app's not going to work. My daughter's just going to Google the phrase, how do I get around parental controls on that nanny? Well, I have done a great many presentations across the Bay Area, Palo Alto, San Francisco, Santa Clara, Fremont. I actually have spoken with two people who work for NetNanny, and they told me that NetNanny has employees whose full-time job is to Google the phrase, how do I get around parental controls on NetNanny? And every possible variation on that phrase. And if they find that some kid has found a hole in the app, they patch it within hours and your app will update. These apps work. And they are getting more sophisticated as the bad stuff online gets more sophisticated. I had another parent in California who said, hey, I get what you're saying, but, I'm pretty tech savvy. I can look at my kid's phone and see how they're using their phone and look at apps recently installed and recent activity. This is wrong. This parent has no clue that many of these apps are now designed to be invisible to parents who don't know how to access them. Vault app looks like a calculator, and it is a calculator. You enter a 5-digit passcode, and the calculator vanishes and reveals the vault of obscene photos that the parent didn't know was there. The notion that you can look at someone's phone and have any idea how that phone is being used is very 2007. It might have been true 13 years ago. It is not true today. If you're going to give your kid a smartphone, then you must install on that phone parental monitoring software, which now is really easy to use. You get a dashboard on your own phone. If there's an attempt to break the administrator password to install an app without the appropriate password or any attempt to install a new app, you'll get a flashing alert on your phone. And then you'll need to sit down with your kid and say, hey, I got this alert that somebody tried to install an app on your phone. Can you explain that to me? This is your job. It is not the job of the best friend to limit what your kid is doing on their phone. It's your job. I go into this topic in much greater detail in the new edition of my book, Girls on the Edge. That's the second edition, which just came out 2 weeks ago. The first edition was 10 years ago, and it's pretty antique. So if you're interested in this topic, social media and girls, I hope you will read my book, Girls on the Edge. Social media, as you can see, is more of a girls issue. But there are other issues that affect boys more than girls. And so I wrote a book called Boys Adrift, the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. And that book begins with this growing phenomenon of families where girls are doing well in school and the boys are not. Same home, same demographics. The girl is excelling and the boy is not excelling. Why is that? This was not true in this country 40 years ago, 50 years ago, where it was actually the reverse was more common 40 years ago, 50 years ago. In that generation, it was common for the boys to excel and the girls were being left behind. Now we're in a very different world. Why is that? That's the question I try to answer in Boys Adrift. Earlier, I mentioned video games. There is a gender gap. I mentioned at the beginning of our time together today, I mentioned that there is this explosion in young Americans, adolescents and young adults who are anxious and depressed. I didn't mention that there's a big gender gap in that explosion. Girls are affected more than boys. Girls are now much more likely to be anxious or depressed compared with their brothers. Why is that? Well, it appears, and we've got good evidence on this point, that both girls and boys are spending more time in front of screens, but girls are spending more time with social media and boys are spending more time with video games. As we saw, the more time you spend on social media, the more likely you are to become anxious or depressed. That is not true of video games. Why not? I mentioned before the innate frustration that is built into the video game experience. You can spend hours. You can spend a lot of money trying to create a perfect, funny video. And you can create a video that you think is perfect and funny. And you can post it on Instagram and it fizzles. You post it on TikTok and after a week, it's got 12 views. You put all that time, effort, and money into it and you got nothing. On video games, that's not true. Video games are constructed very differently. If you devote many hours, you will be successful. First time you play Fortnite, you get killed in the first minute. Okay, so classic Fortnite Battle Royale, you're one of 100 people on this island and you're all trying to kill each other. You want to be the one victor, the one who survives after all 99 are dead. First week, that isn't going to happen. But if you work hard, you will get better. If you put in the hours and days and weeks and months, what I hear from teenage boys is that after 4 to 6 weeks of playing the game, a couple hours a day, every day, after 4 to 6 weeks, you will be a victor. You will conquer. And this is not just Fortnite. This is built into every video game. With RDR2, it's going to take 60 hours. Call of Duty, it's going to take many hours. Grand Theft Auto, it's going to take typically about 20 hours. But if you put in the time, you will win. Wall Street Journal had an article advising parents, let your kid spend more time playing video games because the kids playing video games are happy and the kids on social media are not. That's very short-sighted, as we will see. You need to limit, govern, and guide what your kid is doing on video games. Let's look at the evidence. So researchers find that girls and boys tend to play different games and they play them differently. So right now, Candy Crush and Homescapes are among the most popular games for girls. When you look to see who has spent more than 3 hours in the last week playing Candy Crush or Homescapes, you find on that parameter that girls greatly outnumber boys. Most popular video games for American boys right now. Number 1 is Minecraft. Number 2, Call of Duty. Number 3, Grand Theft Auto, even though it's 7 years old. The most recent Grand Theft Auto is now 7 years old. When it came out, of course, it was number 1. It's still number 3. And when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out next year, all industry experts say it will again reclaim the number 1 spot, many years in the making. Fortnite's falling fast, but it's still got the number 4 spot, although teenagers I'm talking to don't believe it because they don't know anyone who's playing Fortnite anymore. RDR2 is a smaller but very loyal following, and it has the number 5 spot. Researchers find the average girl playing Candy Crush or Homescapes typically spends about 20 minutes in a session. The average boy playing a game like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto typically spends about 2.5 hours in a session. What's the relationship between the time you spend playing video games and how well you do in school? Well, researchers find that there is no relationship. That curve is pretty flat, below 6 hours a week. A kid who spends on average 5 hours a week playing video games doesn't do any better or worse than a kid who doesn't play video games at all. Beyond that inflection point of 6 hours a week, there is a roughly linear and negative association. A kid who spends 10 hours a week does less well in school than a kid who spends 5 hours a week. A kid who spends 20 hours a week does much less well. And I asked Craig Anderson, lead investigator on that study, I asked him, why is that? And he answered with one word: displacement. Displacement. What Craig Anderson means by displacement is that if you're spending 20 hours a week playing video games, that's 20 hours a week you're not doing something else. like studying or sleeping. Got a lot of boys who are staying up past midnight playing video games, and then they're sleep deprived during school hours the next day. Recent study finds that the average boy now spends over 9 hours a week playing video games, compared with about 90 minutes a week for the average American girl. You'll find these guidelines in your handout based on the research. No more than 40 minutes a night on school nights playing video games, no more than an hour a day on weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. So if you go 3 weeks without playing video games, that does not mean you're allowed to indulge in a 7-hour binge on a Saturday. No screen time, no video games until all the chores are done and all the homework is done. And that means, again, no devices in the bedroom, no video game console in the bedroom. Video game console has to be in a public space. Scholars define a violent video game as a game in which you must kill in order to achieve your mission. Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto are violent games. So they then created a cohort of about 3,000 kids, recruited a cohort of 3,000 kids at 12 years of age, and followed each of these kids for more than 3 years. At enrollment, you do a comprehensive psychological assessment to determine for every one of these kids, quantitatively, to what degree is this particular kid altruistic or selfish, honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, gentle or hostile. Then you follow these kids for 3 years. You also determine every video game this kid is playing and how much time they spend playing video games. So one way to conceptualize this study is to imagine 2 kids who are demographically identical, by which I mean they have the same race, ethnicity, religion, household income, family composition, and these kids also score identically on these psychological parameters: altruistic, honest, patient, gentle. And both these boys spend 20 hours a week playing video games. The only difference between these 2 boys is one of these boys, his parents do not allow him to play violent games. So he's playing mostly sports games like Madden NFL football or MDA basketball. The boy next door, who's demographically and psychologically identical, is playing the most popular video games for American boys, most of which are violent games. He's playing Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. These kids are identical, psychologically identical at enrollment. But after 3 years, the boy playing the violent games has changed. He's become more selfish, less honest, less patient. And after 3 years, not after a week, not after a month, but after 3 years, the magnitude of that shift is pretty substantial. After 3 years, the difference between these 2 boys who were identical at enrollment is comparable to the difference between a boy raised in a loving and nurturing home all his life and a boy raised in a violent and abusive home all his life. Some violent games are worse than others. And by worse, I mean they push this change from honest to dishonest, from patient to impatient, from altruistic to selfish. They push this change farther and faster than other games. The worst violent games are games which employ what the researchers call a moral inversion. A moral inversion means that in the context of the game, good is bad and bad is good. So for example, Grand Theft Auto. In order to achieve your mission in Grand Theft Auto, you must acquire money and weapons. And you can get the best weapons by killing police officers. That's the only way you can get their weapons. You have to kill them. Now, in the real world, to sneak up on police officers and kill them just because they are police officers would be evil and wrong. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do, because you can get the best weapons that way. There are no pre-made female avatars in Call of Duty. If you want to play Call of Duty using an avatar provided by the game, you must play as a man. There are women in the game. Many of them are prostitutes. If you get wounded in your firefight with a police officer, you can restore your health to 100% by having sex with a prostitute. You go up to her, she tells you how much, you give her that money, and then you have sex with her, meaning you watch your avatar flopping on top of her. But that will cost you money, and you will need money in order to complete your mission. You don't have to do this, but it then makes good sense to take out your long knife and stab her in the back. And as she very realistically crumples and dies in a pool of blood, you get your money back. That's the only way you can get your money back. You have to kill her. Now, in the real world, to kill a prostitute in order to get your money back would be insane and evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. And this is one of the most popular video games right now in the United States. Some years back, when it was the #1 most popular video game in the United States, lawmakers in Sacramento said, "Are you kidding me? Most popular video game in the United States is a game which has been shown by research to change personality, to cause kids to become less honest, less patient, more selfish." They flew Anderson and Tilly to Sacramento, and they heard their sworn testimony, and they wrote a law. The California statute made it a civil offense to sell not any game, but the worst games like Grand Theft Auto to a minor child under 18. Basically put these games in the same category as cigarettes, put them behind the counter. If you wanted to buy them in the state of California, you would have to show ID, show that you are at least 18 years of age. The video game industry immediately brought suit, claiming that the California statute violated their First Amendment right of free speech. And the video game lawsuit went to the United States Supreme Court. And in a decision written by the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the United States Supreme Court agreed with the video game industry and threw out the California statute, rendering it null and void. In a concurrence written by Justice Samuel Alito, Justice Alito said, "Hey, I have read the work of Anderson and Gentili, and I share the concerns of California parents and California lawmakers. These games are heinous." That's the word he used. He said, "No teenager should be playing a game in which you get rewarded for killing police officers, just for being police officer." But he continued, "Nevertheless, it is the ruling of this court that deciding what games children will play is not the job of the California State Assembly, it is the job of the parent." And I have included a link to the full text of Justice Alito's concurrence in your handout, because you need to understand that this is your job. You must limit, govern, and guide what games your son is playing. Do not follow the advice of the Wall Street Journal to let kids spend as much time as they want to online because they seem to really enjoy it. Wrong. You must know the research. You must know the game. If your son wants to go to a friend's house or play a video game with a friend, it is your job to call up the friend's parents and say, "Hey, yeah, I know, I'm glad that you guys have reassured me about social distancing and masks, but I also need you to reassure me that there will be a grown-up checking to see what games they are playing, making sure they're not playing a game like Grand Theft Auto." And if the other boy's parents say, "Hey," they go in the room, close the door, have their headsets on, "We're not going to waste our time chaperoning what video games our teenage sons are playing," then it is your job to say to your son, "I'm sorry, you are not allowed to go to that boy's house." That's your job as a parent. I said it's your job to know what game your son is playing, to know about that game. How are you supposed to do that? Well, fortunately, we have a website based in California with good parents writing good reviews, not influenced by the video game industry, carefully vetted. I have no affiliation with Common Sense Media, but I highly recommend their website for this purpose. And there's something else that's happened just in the 6 months since the coronavirus pandemic, and that is children 9 to 12 years of age. The #1 video game right now for children 9 to 12 years of age in the United States is Roblox. Roblox, New York Times 4 weeks ago had a feature article documenting that 3/4 of American kids 9 to 12 years of age are now on the Roblox platform. Players spent more than 3 billion hours on Roblox in July, which is more than double as much as they spent in February. Roblox is not really a game. It's a game platform. When you're on Roblox, you choose among 40 million games to play. More than 30,000 new games are uploaded every day. So there's just no way that you can bet every one of those games or that anyone can bet them. The games are immensely diverse. You can solve a puzzle. You can explore a haunted castle. You can chat with strangers. You can adopt a pet, a virtual pet, of course. You can whack pigs with baseball bats. You can engage in simulated sex or in violent combat. That's the Bloody Mary challenge, which was very popular in Roblox because, until after several years, they finally removed it recently. This is a screenshot of the review of particularly the sex feature on Roblox at Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media overall recommends that no child under 14 years of age should play Roblox. I personally would say that even that is too lenient. I don't think kids should be on Roblox at all because there's just no way you can know what they're doing, and there is some really toxic stuff on Roblox. But certainly no child under 14 should be on Roblox. Honestly, very few kids 14 and over want to be on Roblox. It's regarded as a little kid's game, and older teenagers don't want to play it. But ironically, the game that is most popular with kids 9 to 12 years of age is certainly a game that 9 to 12-year-olds should not be playing. Again, the website is commonsensemedia.org, and of course, that is in your handout. The first job of the parent is to teach virtue. But that requires that you teach from a position of authority. If you're talking to your kid about not cheating on a test and you say, you know, I personally wouldn't cheat on tests because that's just not my thing. But you know, you do you. You do you, whatever floats your boat. You're not teaching anything. As you know, I've been a medical doctor in the United States for 34 years. I've witnessed firsthand the collapse of American parenting. As recently as 20 years ago, it was common for American parents to say things like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat others as you would like to be treated. That's not a suggestion, that is a command. Over the last 20 years, I've seen that command soften, morph into a question. And the question is often something like, well, you know, how would you feel if someone did that to you? And the parent has no idea what to say when her son says, if someone did that to me, I'd kick him in the nuts and then I'd sit on his face. A regular columnist from the New York Times wrote a column about enlightened parenting. Link is in your handout. She said, enlightened parenting means, and I'm quoting now, setting your child free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong. And if in so doing your child becomes a stranger to you, then so be it. She said, let them enjoy the uncensored artistic truth that they will find online. And if they become a stranger to you, then so be it. That may seem enlightened to some, but it is not enlightened. It is a dereliction of duty. If you set your child free to discover themselves the uncensored artistic truth of contemporary American culture, What they are likely to find is Cardi B, Bruno Mars, Miley Cyrus, Akon, Eminem. Look, what is childhood for? A 4-year-old horse is a mature adult. The Kentucky Derby is raced with 3-year-olds. A 4-year-old human has barely begun. And a horse is a bigger animal than a human. Why? What is the point? Humans are children and adolescents for more years than most animals live. Why? Well, we don't have to guess. We have scholars who've devoted their career, like Dr. Melvin Conner, whom I cite. And what these researchers find is that human childhood is as long as it is because it takes many years for parents to teach the child right from wrong, good from bad, art from trash. That's your job. The New York Times recommendation to set your child loose to experience the uncensored artistic truth that they discover online is an abdication of parental responsibility, and it is profoundly unhuman. It's not what we are wired to do as humans. Well, I devote another chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to addressing the question of what virtue you should teach. And the answer I give in that chapter is the first virtue you should teach is the virtue of humility. And the chapter is titled Humility, in which I share strategies for how you teach this. Because many Americans don't get it. They're immersed in a culture which is all about walking tall and standing proud. I met with middle school students and I asked them, what is humility? Raise your hand if you think you know what the word humility means. And the boy raised his hand and I called on him and he said, humility means trying to convince yourself you're dumb when you know you're smart. I said, no, that is not humility, that is psychosis, okay? That is a detachment from reality. I said, humility means being as interested in other people as you are in yourself. And the kids are all looking at me with a blank face. They've never heard this before. They have received no instruction. Justin Bieber had a big hit with his song, I Was Born to Be Somebody. I'll light up the sky like lightning and this world will belong to me. I was born to stand tall and this world will belong to me. That's characteristic of American popular culture. This world will belong to me. It is the opposite of humility. It is pride. I don't blame the kids for not knowing because their parents don't know. American parents have no clue for the most part. I was speaking to American parents about the virtue of humility, and during Q&A, a mom said, I don't want to teach my daughter to be humble. I want her to have self-esteem, so when that big job opportunity comes along, she'll go for it. I don't want her to be humble. And I said, Mom, with all due respect, you are confused. You are confusing being humble with being timid. Those are not the same thing. In fact, they are very nearly opposites. And the virtue you want for your daughter is not self-esteem. The virtue you're thinking of is courage. Courage means that you understand the risks and you know your own weaknesses, your own shortcomings, and you find the strength to push forward despite your fear. There is no courage without fear. You want your daughter to have the virtue of courage. The parents are confused. How can the kids know if the parents have no idea? Before the coronavirus, before the pandemic, I visited an elementary school, visited a third grade classroom. The assignment was to write your name on a white piece of paper and then attach to that white piece of paper 5 adjectives describing how amazing you are. And Mateo here has written a genius, misspelled, excellent, misspelled, talented, awesome, and marvelous. I'm not picking on Mateo. He's just doing the assignment. There's no awareness on the part of the teachers or the leadership of that school how puffing up bloated self-esteem will lead to unhappiness, disappointment, resentment. That's not a guess. We have longitudinal cohort studies, which I cite in that chapter of The Collapse of Parenting, showing the kid with the highest self-esteem at age 15, 10 years later, when you follow that young adult and they are now 25, that is the kid who is most likely to be narcissistic and resentful. No awareness among those promoting the cult of self-esteem, how that cult of self-esteem leads to narcissism. Look, I've been around for a long time. I remember the campaign to boost self-esteem 30 years ago. No awareness on the part of those well-intentioned people how puffing up self-esteem would lead to narcissism, how telling kids you're special because you're you would lead to kids who think they are more special than anyone else. And we now have, as I said, multiple longitudinal cohort studies showing that the kid who has the highest self-esteem at age 15 is the kid who is most likely to be the resentful and envious young adult at 25. Because if I'm so great, how come I'm working in a cubicle for a low wage? If I'm the best there is, why am I not recognized? Researchers at UCLA looked at the most popular TV shows in the United States from 1967 through 2007, and then ranked them quantitatively on 16 parameters. What was the show teaching? These most popular TV shows, what were they teaching? And they found actually great constancy from 1967 through 1997. The message was do the right thing. What really matters is doing the right thing, even if it hurts. And that was true in the Andy Griffith Show of 1967, Happy Days 1977, Family Ties 1987, Sabrina the Teenage Witch 1997. Very different shows with very different composition and production values. But the message in each of those most popular shows was that you need to do the right thing. That was number one. And having friends was number two. Between 1997 and 2007, American culture flipped upside down. Being famous and being wealthy were at the bottom of that list of 16 from 1967 through 1997. In 2007, suddenly being famous and being wealthy were number one and number two. Doing the right thing had dropped to number 16. On the most popular shows of 2007, like Survivor, American Idol, and iCarly, it's all about winning and being famous. Doing the right thing, that's going to get you voted off the island. These UCLA researchers said that American culture is now a cult of fame and wealth, where what is most valued in the culture is being famous and wealthy. Justin Bieber, Bruno Mars, Cardi B did not create this, but they embody it, they celebrate it, they promote it. Bruno Mars wants you to know he has his own private jet. There he is on his private jet. What's wrong with that? A couple of things wrong with it. One thing that's wrong with it is that if you are immersed in the American popular culture, which is now all about being famous and wealthy, and you are not famous and wealthy, then you are a loser. That's the lesson of much of contemporary American culture. Social media, as used by American teens, is all about broadcasting me. Here I am at the game. Here I am at the party. Here I am picking my nose. And seeing where you rank relative to everybody else. How many people are following you? How many people like that post? One of the most robust empirical findings in human psychology. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. If your expectations are low, odds are that reality will exceed your expectations and you will be happy. if you have puffed up self-esteem and you think you're the greatest thing ever, and yeah, I was speaking at a private school serving affluent kids. And I said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Raise your hand if you'd like to share with your peers where you see yourself in 10 years. And the boy shot up his hand. And he said, I figure I'll have at least $100 billion. Mark Zuckerberg had one good idea. And he's got what, $40 billion? I have like 8 good ideas. So I figure I'll have like at least $100 billion. And he wasn't joking. I engaged him in conversation. He was absolutely serious. I would be willing to bet that 10 years down the road, if that boy's self-esteem remains as bloated and puffed up as it was when I met him, he is very likely to be frustrated, envious, and resentful because he's not going to have $100 billion. He's not going to have $1 billion. He is proud. He has bloated self-esteem. And we have a great deal of research showing that that leads to unhappiness. I took this photograph in Times Square. Live for now. Don't worry about the sugar. Live for now. Whatever floats your boat, live for now. If it feels good, do it. The real hazard of contemporary American popular culture, the culture of Cardi B, Bruno Mars, if it feels good, do it. Whatever floats your boat, is that it overvalues fame and wealth, prioritizes relations with same-age peers over the family, and disrespects parental authority. So what do you do about it? I began today by talking about the breaking of bonds across generations, co-rumination, kids now confiding only in other kids. You must restore those bonds. And that has to begin with eating supper with your kids. No devices allowed at the dinner table. No TV on during the dinner hour. The benefits are huge and do not taper. Frank Algar and his colleagues interviewed more than 10,000 adolescents coast to coast and asked them, in the last 7 days, how many evening meals have you had at home with at least one parent? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then for each of these 10,000 plus kids, quantified internalizing problems like anxiety and depression, externalizing problems like hitting the wall in anger, positive well-being, pro-social behavior, and life satisfaction, and found a huge effect, not just going from 0 to 7, but at almost every step along the way. With each additional evening meal at home with a parent, you see a decrease in internalizing problems like anxiety and depression. You see a decrease in internalizing problems. You see an increase in positive well-being, an increase in life satisfaction. And yet what has happened? In another study, researchers asked teenagers, have you had an evening meal at home with a parent in the last 24 hours? In 1992, 2/3 of teenagers said, yes, I have. In 2005, 2/3 of teenagers said, no, I have not. And the evidence we have suggests things have gotten only somewhat worse since then. Until the pandemic, we're just now beginning to get data. But I think it comes as no surprise that since the pandemic, kids are having more opportunities for meals at home with parents. But many parents are not taking advantage of that. They're saying, hey, my kid's happier if he's just in his bedroom with his screen, playing video games with his friends. Turn off the device. Insist on a family meal together. Take the opportunity. My wife and I went to buy a new car. And when the salesman found out we had a teenage daughter, he was very excited and wanted to sell us the rear seat entertainment system and handed us this flyer. The 2 kids are wearing headphones looking at a screen. Mom is looking back at her kids, smiling as if to say, hey, this is great. We can drive to Lake Tahoe, never have to talk to my kids at all. What are we thinking? Time is precious. We're all in a hurry. Time in the car is special. Time in the car is private time. No earbuds, no headsets in the car. When your kid is in the car, she should be listening to you and you should be listening to her. She should not be listening to Bruno Mars or Cardi B and you don't even know what she's listening to. UCLA researchers found actually watching, observing American families, typical middle income or affluent family returns home, and within 1 hour, often within 5 minutes, they are each in their own room looking at a different screen. Don't do that. You cannot have a family if the family, in any meaningful sense, if the family is not spending time together. No screens in the bedroom, no TV in the bedroom, no video game console in the bedroom. Nothing in the bedroom except a bed. The TV should be in a common room. And I want you to know that I practice what I preach. My wife's parents live with us. There's our one big TV. That's my father-in-law and my mother-in-law near the fire. That's my wife and my daughter. Not trying to entertain one another, but physically together. That's where family life begins. And we do a lot of planting. We have some room in the backyard where we grow our own squash, our own cucumbers, our own beets, our own tomatoes. There they are playing parcheesi, and there's our group selfie. It costs nothing to do this, to have fewer screens. American parents are confused. They think they have to choose between being the tiger mom pushing their kid to achieve or the Irish setter dad who just wants kids to have a good time, do whatever they want. Both are mistaken. The last chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Meaning of Life. It's part of your job as a parent to share with your child your understanding of the big picture. Why are we here? What is the point? And it better be something more profound than getting into Stanford or earning a lot of money, because those answers will not satisfy. It's not a guess. We know this. And as a medical doctor, I have known many other physicians who are earning lots of money, $600,000, $800,000 a year, and they are miserable because they're working hard at a job they no longer enjoy, and they feel trapped by their big mortgage and all their expenses. Money will not satisfy. That's a robust empirical finding. You must instill your understanding of the big picture. Because without that big picture, pushing a child to do well in school is just a race to nowhere. To borrow the title of the documentary that makes that point, and the result is anxiety, depression, and disengagement. But you can't be the Irish setter dad letting kids do whatever they want. Because if you let American teens do whatever they want, what you find is American boys want video games and American girls want social media and YouTube. You must instill a longing for something better, higher, deeper, more lasting than video games and social media. So in your handout, 12-page handout, I provide 4 takeaway summaries of this talk. Based on the evidence, I think we have sufficient evidence to say you should prioritize the family over same-age peers, limit social media and video games as per the guidelines that I provide there that we have discussed today, resist the temptation of safetyism, and educate desire. Teach your child the difference between art and trash. which they will not learn from YouTube. Again, you'll find much more on these topics in my books, Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, The Collapse of Parenting, Why Gender Matters. On my previous trips to Sacramento, I find that people there some people do a lot of driving. And if you do, I'd like you to know that all of my books are available as audiobooks. Translations are available in these 8 languages. The handout is online. The handout is my name, leonardsachs.com/TARBIYA.PDF. You must include the www and the .pdf. And we have almost an hour remaining. And it's now your turn. And I and the panelists will do our best to answer your questions. Find the chat, click on chat, post your question. And I am now going to exit screen share. I'm hoping you've all had a chance to copy down that link. Incidentally, it is case sensitive and it is all lowercase. And of course, my hosts are welcome to copy this and post it on their own website. I am going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sachs. That has been an incredibly eye-opening session for all of us, I'm sure. So I've had a few questions come in, and I've kind of been noting them as we went along. So let me just open up my questions. Okay, so this one is actually going back to the music, the topic of music and popular culture, right? So we're talking about, when we endorse some of these songs, when we endorse certain artists, whether it's Beethoven or another classical artist, or a song, even a contemporary song that we as parents, we approve of the subliminal underlying messaging. When we do that, and then we condemn other songs that may be more popular or that friends are listening to, are we sending mixed messages to the children when we are saying, listen to this, but don't listen to that, or even of this artist, this one song is fine, but I don't recommend the rest of them? There's a second part, but I'll let you address that first.
No, I don't think that's a mixed message any more than the human experience is a mixed experience. And no artist, or very few, no artist that I can think of has produced only wonderful work. We are all human. We are all a mix of good and evil. And I have another workshop for schools about teaching good and evil, because I find many schools are doing this very badly. They make it seem very simple. And I talk specifically about teaching Nazi Germany and World War II and the Holocaust. Unfortunately, the way this topic is often taught in the United States is the Nazis were bad and the Jews were innocent victims and the Americans were good. And so all you have to do is figure out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And there are some books used widely in the United States, like Mouse, where the Nazis are wolves and the Jews are mice and the Americans are dogs. So you can tell literally at a glance who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. That's not the real world. And when I speak to teachers or I speak with students, I always quote Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who thought a lot about this while he was in a concentration camp. Because he used to think this way, that, yeah, the good guys are these guys and the bad guys are these guys. And he said, look, the line dividing good and evil does not just divide one religion from another religion, or one political party from another political party, or one country from another country. The line dividing good from evil runs through every human heart. We all have to struggle against temptation, against evil. We all continually have to choose to do good and not to give in to temptation. And that is true for every one of us. It is not a mixed message to say that Chris Jansen has written some great songs and some really bad songs. It's a reflection of the fact that he is a human being, and so am I. In the close of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I say, look, you cannot teach a virtue to your child which you yourself do not possess. And that means that in order to become a better parent, you must become a better person. And I say in that chapter, I have failed miserably. I have done bad things, not in ancient times, but quite recently. But I still have to try. Every day I have to pick myself up and try to do better. That is the human experience. No artist is a saint. No artist has never failed, or at least I can think of one. That's where your judgment comes in. That's where you must teach your child to judge the difference between art and trash. And incidentally, American kids in most American schools are systematically taught the opposite, that no one can say for some other person. So this was actually to a group of Muslim teenagers. I was saying to them, one of them said to me, and I'm not picking on Muslims, I've had the same experience with Catholic teenagers and Jewish teenagers. I've had this experience with American teenagers across the board without regard to religion. I mentioned Muslim just to mention that Muslim kids are not immune to this. So, but this was quite recently, within the last 12 months, at a Muslim, and an encounter I had just with Muslim teenagers. I said, well, how do you know the difference between art and trash? What's to say that Shakespeare's Hamlet is better art, be super bad? And a boy immediately raised his hand and said, I think Hamlet sucks. Totally boredom city. And Superbad was great, one of the all-time great classics. He said, hey, Dr. Sachs, if you like Hamlet, that's fine. Nobody can tell anybody else what's good and what's bad. Everybody has to decide for themselves. And I've heard that at American schools, coast to coast, Muslim, Catholic, Jewish, evangelical Christian, and secular public schools. Everybody gets to decide for themselves what's good and bad. Nobody can tell anybody else what's good and bad. That is a mantra across the board, and it's just wrong. It is simply wrong. Shakespeare's Hamlet is great art, and the movie Superbad, despite its many virtues, is not great art. But no one's ever taught this kid how to distinguish art from trash. And the end result is Cardi B doing a video about vaginal lubrication that is praised across the board and is a #1 hit song in the United States. That's what you get when you have a generation that's been taught nobody can tell anybody else what's art and what's trash.
Sorry, I had muted myself. So yeah, thank you. That's a really comprehensive reply to that question. So we've got several questions rolling in, really good questions from everybody. I'm going to try to get to all of them, and we're going to be going until 2 p.m. PST. We have that much time with Dr. Sachs, 2 p.m. Pacific. So here's the next one. I know there is some suggestion that one of the reasons boys struggle at school now more than before is because of the design of the school curriculum and the environment at school. It doesn't feed their strengths. Is there a connection between this and video games as an escape from school and what it fails to provide these young boys?
I'm smiling because that's my topic. I lead workshops for schools specifically on how you engage and motivate boys in English, language arts, creative writing, social studies, history, across the content areas. And again, that's been a major focus of my visits to schools, learning about that. American education changed over the last 30 years in several ways that had the unintended consequence of disengaging boys. One big way was that schools became unfriendly to boys. What do I mean by that? So I was visiting an elementary school, and principal and I had worked out in advance what the day would look like, and the day was going to begin with me meeting with the principal, and she and I were going to talk about why she invited me and what she wanted to get out of the day. So there I was, first period, sitting in the principal's office. But over the 20 minutes or so that I sat there, 9 kids marched in. each kid came in separately. They had all been set down. They'd all gotten in trouble. 9 boys, kindergarten, first, second, third grade boys. And asked them, what are you doing here? And they said, we got in trouble. They each got in trouble. In trouble for? Well, Jason and me were pointing fingers at each other saying, bang, bang, you're dead. Or the teacher said we could draw anything we want in art class, and I drew a picture of a gun, and I got set down here. Or this happened to be winter, and these 2 boys were seen throwing snowballs. They came to the class, so they immediately got sent to the principal's office for throwing snowballs. Boys doing things that boys have always done now gets you in trouble. That's what I mean in a nutshell when I say that schools have become unfriendly to boys. And again, I wrote a book about this called Boys Adrift, why this has happened and what we can do about it. The good news is it's very easy to fix if schools have any interest in fixing it. It is I wouldn't say it's very easy, but it is not difficult to create a school that is friendly to boys without making it unfriendly to girls. And I know a lot about that. I can tell you there are many schools in California and across the United States where kids are now prohibited from writing stories where anybody gets killed violently. Violent death is prohibited. I can tell you that such prohibitions are not effective. They do not create boys who want to write about how they might feel if they weren't invited to a party. They do create boys who say, school's stupid, I'm going to go home and play Grand Theft Auto, where I get rewarded for killing people. So the relationship between video games and school is that there's a lot of connections actually, but one is that boys who are told in school, you're not allowed to write a story in which anyone gets hurt. Those boys are like, well, that just shows you how stupid school is. Doing well in school comes to be seen as unmasculine, so they don't even want to do well in school. And they much prefer spending their free time playing video games where they get rewarded for killing. So again, the lack of awareness of these gender differences has led to this unfortunate situation where many, many American boys now think it is uncool and unmasculine to work hard in school.
Okay, that's a really awesome response. And by training, I'm actually an educator. I'm a public school teacher. I'm not working right now, but I find that answer really fascinating, and I hope that I can take part in one of your training workshops on that as well. Okay, so we have, we addressed that one. I have a variation. Several people have asked a variation of this question, so I'm going to go ahead and ask this one. Almost every aspect of modern mainstream American culture that you pointed out is a major challenge. And there are issues that adults are dealing with, not just the children. So how are we as parents supposed to make these changes for our children when we ourselves are so mired and immersed in some of these issues, whether it is being kind of really addicted to social media or that narcissistic kind of mentality or any of those things? Like, where should adults begin?
Yeah, so I was speaking to middle school kids at a very fine independent school just north of Towson, Maryland, which is an affluent suburb of Baltimore, Maryland. And I very often when I visit a school, we structure the day. So I meet with the kids during the day, and then I speak to the parents in the evening. And it's a good thing to do, because I said to these kids, I present the evidence to them in a back and forth question and answer kind of way. And then I say, hey, I just want you guys to be aware, this evening I'm going to meet with some of your parents, and I'm going to tell your parents no more than 40 minutes a day total on social media. Do any of you have any comments about that? And an 8th grade boy raised his hand, and I called on him. And he said, could you tell me how to install that limit on my mom's phone? And he then proceeded to tell the entire middle school. And it really broke my heart listening to him. He told the entire middle school out loud how he comes home from school and he would love to talk to his mom about the school day, and he tries to. And she's looking at her phone, not even looking at him, scrolling through her Instagram, giving distracted one-word answers or no answer at all. And my heart just broke. How is that boy supposed to know better than his mom? That's why I was thinking of that when I wrote that passage in the closing chapter, The Collapse of Parenting, that to become a better parent, you have to become a better person. You must practice what you preach. If you don't want your kids spending more than 40 minutes a day on social media, then you can't spend more than 40 minutes a day on social media. You have to practice what you preach, turn off the screens at the supper table, and create a family life. I'm an American. I was born and raised in this country. I've lived in this country all my life. American culture is very rich in healthy opportunities. And I'm very proud that my daughter can sing Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run start to finish without any mistakes. She can sing most of the songs from the Music Man and Singing in the Rain. When we go on long trips, we're singing. We're singing Broadway musicals. We're singing Bruce Springsteen, Lauren Daigle, Zach Williams. There's a lot of great music that we both enjoy, that we all enjoy as a family, that we sing together. But it's your job as the parent. Introduce your child to the culture that you enjoy and to create a family where you enjoy this together.
I think that's so important, is starting with ourselves, you know, and living that example. It's, you know, easier said than done, but certainly very, very important. This kind of leads into our next question, which is about, and you shared, Dr. Sachs, so many excellent tools, such as the Net Nanny, such as, you know, other things to help monitor and limit the exposure to social media and screen time for children. How do we do that? How do we do that without, you know, do you recommend going cold turkey? How do you implement this in your home, in your family?
All right. So, yes, it's got to be cold turkey. And look, that's not just this issue. That's I've had an interest in addictions for all my professional career. I've counseled many addicts, whether it's tobacco, alcohol, or heroin. And what we've learned is that gradual taper doesn't work. So, for example, cigarette smoking. I'm old enough to remember 30 years ago when the experts said, well, try to cut back from a pack a day to half a pack a day. If you take someone who normally smokes a pack a day and cut them down to half a pack a day, what they do is they start taking deeper drags on a cigarette. And a pack-a-day smoker might discard the cigarette when it's half smoked. Now as a half a pack smoker, he's smoking that cigarette down to the very nub. He's developing bad habits of taking deeper drags and smoking more of the cigarette. And now when he goes back to being a pack-a-day smoker, he keeps those bad habits. So at the end of a year cycle, he's actually consuming more tar and nicotine at the end of the year than he was at the beginning of the year. Tapering doesn't work. Low tar cigarettes don't work. A general rule across addictions is that tapering doesn't work. If you need to cut back, you must cut back. So here's what you do. You sit down with your kids and you say, we've been doing some things wrong. We're going to make some changes starting today. No more phones in the bedroom, period. We're going to limit how much you spend on social media and video games. And that takes effect today. Incidentally, the very first thing your daughter will say is, but I use my phone as my alarm clock. Let her know they still make alarm clocks. You can go to the store and buy one. They're not expensive. And now she may really explode. She may say, you're going to like totally ruin my whole life. If both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, you will have a child with better self-control and in most cases, a happier child. Not after a day. The explosion and the silent treatment will often last several days. And the older the child, the louder the explosion and the longer it will last. But if both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, you will have a healthier and usually a happier child.
Okay, very good to know. So cold turkey it is. The tapering does not work. So now that we've, established those rules in our home, let's relate that to how we're living right now with the pandemic, right? Everyone naturally is on screens a lot more. Most children throughout the United States are doing some form of distance learning on the computer. So we have several parents actually who have asked, A, is that okay? What do you do for screen time outside of learning time? And B, can we allow laptops and screen time inside of the bedrooms? Because that just poses a challenge. Sometimes you can't have, 2 or 3 children all sitting at the dining table together doing distance learning.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we're getting data from the spring semester of this year, and a fair summary is it didn't go well. Distance learning is no substitute for in-person learning, and the younger the child, the less well it works. Parents are not professional teachers. Most parents are not trained to homeschool their kids, and they're not doing as good a job as the professionals. This should really not come as a surprise. And to the extent that it comes as a surprise, I think it illustrates the low esteem that most Americans have for the profession of teaching. And we actually have good data on that, looking nationwide. Americans hold teachers in low regard, as opposed to, say, Finland, where teachers are held in very high regard. In Finland, being a teacher is as prestigious as being a physician in the United States. But that's not at all true in this country. In this country, most Americans don't respect the profession of teaching. And I think a corollary of that is that many Americans figured, hey, teaching's nothing special. I can do it. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an investment banker, which are all very prestigious careers. So I can certainly be a teacher. Well, guess what? You can't. It is the rare parent who can be an effective and talented teacher without any instruction in how to teach. So the fact is that distance learning didn't work well on average. Now, there are exceptions. Family where a parent could sit with the kid and work with the kid or spend a lot of time with that kid each day and make sure that they were doing the lesson, those kids did okay. Not surprisingly, the more affluent kids did better than the less affluent kids. But I personally have heard from many parents who said, look, I'm busy. I'm doing my own stuff. I do not have the time to sit and look over my 9-year-old's shoulder all day long. I can't do that. I work full time. Yeah, I'm working from home right now, but I'm still working full time. And I can't have my 9-year-old running in every 5 minutes. I can't. I'm working. And the result I'm hearing from those same parents is that 9-year-old, the teacher may think that he's looking at them because the video camera's on, but in fact, the kid is playing Roblox. He's not even pretending to do the scroll work. And it is not developmentally appropriate to expect a 9-year-old to say, yes, even though there's no grown-up in the room and nobody will know, I will carefully pay attention to everything the teacher is saying, and I will not yield to the temptation to play Roblox, which is on the same computer and easily available to me. If you're going to do distance learning, it needs to be on a school device that is tightly monitored or on a home device that is tightly monitored so that your 9-year-old cannot play Roblox when they're supposed to be paying attention to the teacher. And I've also been doing some workshops for teachers saying it is not developmentally appropriate to expect a 9-year-old boy to sit still and be quiet looking at a screen for 40 minutes. You could do that in the classroom because in the classroom you can jump around and you can engage kids. It doesn't work on a screen. It does not work on a screen. You will have to break things up. You will have to do brain breaks. And we talk about what brain breaks look like and how you do that in distance learning. Like anything else in education, if you prepare and do your homework, the outcomes are better than if you don't prepare and just wing it. And what happened this past spring was that most American schools had no preparation. They just said, well, we got to do it, so let's just do it. They didn't prepare, and the outcomes were not good. Hopefully things will go better this fall. We have very little data so far. The school year has just begun, but hopefully things will go better.
Absolutely. And that's certainly something that we've realized in our own lives and in our community as well, that the extended periods of time on the screens and, distance learning over the computer just it's simply not working. And so that's something for our Tarbiyya audience, our Sacramento audience specifically right now. That's why we actually came up with the idea of a grass room. So we can't hold indoor activities at our, faith-based centers. Okay, sweetie, just a second. I'm sorry. But so we can't do that. So we came up with the idea of a grass room where we have our first grass room tomorrow, everybody, starting at 9:30 in the morning at both Tarbiyya House locations. So you can show up and we just have a really safe, socially distanced fun. We've got an obstacle course. So we're playing and we're learning and we're doing all of those things that you could do in a classroom outside of the computer screen. So come give it a try. We have a free trial for tomorrow if anybody wants to try. I think it'll be really,
it's a
really
great
fun.
idea, and I've encouraged schools to do that. Outdoor experience works so much better.
Absolutely.
Than distance learning.
For sure, absolutely. And hopefully we'll all be past this COVID and back to life as normal sooner rather than later. So I have another question come in from a few different people actually. So we've talked a lot about how mainstream mainstream American media and culture that is kind of being directed at our children all the time is very harmful to their mental health, their happiness, their well-being. What do you feel, Dr. Sachs, is the biggest threat to them in the public school system, if any? It's a loaded question.
You're in California, and I have heard from many friends and acquaintances in California. California is kind of going off the deep end with their sex education curriculum, which is very unfortunate and not at all evidence-based. Girls and boys are different. That's not a political statement. It is a biological reality. And I wrote a book called Why Gender Matters back in 2005, published by Doubleday. And the publisher asked me to bring out a new edition, which I did. And the new edition is quite different because in 2005, transgender was really not a thing. There's one page about transgender in the first edition. It is now common in California for a teenage girl at 14 years of age to decide that she's a boy. And in the state of California, if a counselor, psychologist, or other professional says to that girl, maybe you should wait. After all, I understand from your parents that throughout elementary school, every year you dressed up as a princess for Halloween and you love doing ballet, and now all of a sudden you decided you're a boy. Maybe you should just wait a few months before you transition to the male role. In the state of California, a psychologist who says that now puts their license in jeopardy. They are considered to be practicing conversion therapy, which is unlawful in the state of California and is grounds for losing your license. So California, like some other states like Massachusetts, have really gone off the deep end. And this is not just harmful to that child who believes that she is trans. It is harmful to every child because this girl attends a school with other students. And this girl has always been known as Vanessa. And now the students are told, Vanessa is now Victor, and you are all to address him as Victor. What every student at that school is now being taught is that gender is whatever you want it to be. And what used to be a fundamental element of identity is now open to question. And I have heard from schools in California where they have Trans Day, and they celebrate trans kids the way we used to have bake sales. They now celebrate that kid who has bravely come out as trans. And Vanessa's now Victor, and hooray, let's all applaud for Victor, who's now using the boys' bathroom. California has gone farther than most other states in not only going this direction, but mandating it. And any parent who questions it is a bigot. Any psychologist who questions it can lose their license. I think this is really harmful, and parents need to be on their guard. And California does still allow you to withdraw your student from sex education. And if you are attending a school where they are now mandating this beginning in elementary school, this instruction, Heather has, 2 mommies and Vanessa's now Victoria, you need to get your kid out of that sex education class because it creates confusion where there should not be confusion. And again, I wrote a book called Why Gender Matters, which now has 12 chapters, and 4 of those 12 chapters are on gender nonconforming, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And the great irony, as I point out there, the great irony of the trans activist movement has been a hardening of gender stereotypes. As recently as 10 years ago, look, my daughter wants to enroll at the United States Air Force Academy, as her cousin has done. He is a cadet in the United States Air Force Academy, and she dreams of following her footsteps. And yet today, when a teenage girl says, yeah, I want to fly combat aircraft for the United States Air Force, people now ask, oh, are you trans? What are your preferred pronouns? Do you prefer are you transitioning to the male role? If you're not a pink Barbie doll kind of girl, all of a sudden now people are asking if you're trans, which is wrong, and it is harmful. So yeah, this confusion about male and female, which is now prevalent across the state of California, is harmful to children. It is harmful to every child, not just to that teenage girl who's decided that she's a boy. And I defend that claim at great length in my book, Why Gender Matters.
Very, very important. And like you said, very kind of specific to us here in California too. So we have several questions about older children, kind of 18 plus, past high school. Yes, is it too late? Is the question. If they're away at college, what can we do? How can we help them to combat their own social media addictions and possibly even monitor some of that?
Once your young adult has left home, it's much harder. But don't lose hope. So again, the brain research shows that girls reach full maturity in brain development by about 22 years of age. Boys don't reach full maturity in brain development until closer to 29 or 30 years of age. If you just Google online at what age is the human brain mature, you'll usually find something like 25 or 26. That's because if you add 22 plus 30 and divide by 2, you get 26. But in fact, there are dramatic sex differences in development of the brain. The most discouraging email I get is the email from the parent who says, my son is not working and not looking for work. He rolls out of bed late every day. He spends essentially all his time playing video games or looking at pornography, works a few hours a week at the coffee shop to pay for his video games. He is 32 years old. I make recommendations based only on what I have seen work in my clinical practice or what we have good evidence in the scholarly literature will work. What intervention can be deployed by the parent of a 32-year-old that we can be confident will be effective? There is none. There is no intervention at that age which will reliably be effective. So I say to parents of teenagers, don't think your son is going to grow out of this phase. He may not. Video games are very well designed. And again, many parents over 40 don't have a clue about contemporary video games. When parents over 40 think about video games, they're thinking about Pac-Man. And they have no idea what a game like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto is like. These games have earned many billions of dollars. They have very deep pockets. They are immensely immersive, and the physics are utterly realistic. And your son can be consumed by this game. Don't wait for him to grow out of that phase. It may never happen. My strength and my passion is the child in pre-K through grade 12, because as a clinician, I've seen many such kids who were going in the wrong direction, and the parents with guidance were able to turn that kid around. And that's very rewarding and very gratifying to hear from the parent or to hear from the kid themselves that, hey, I was going in the wrong direction. And this teenage boy says, I took a baseball bat to my own video game device and destroyed it because I was convinced after hearing from you, I was going in the wrong direction. The older the kid, the harder it is. And once that kid has left home, your options are very limited. And to be perfectly blunt, the only option that I've seen that is effective for that young man who is 25, 28, 30 years of age is to give an ultimatum and say, I need you to shape up or we will stop supporting you. And you must follow through on that ultimatum. And in some cases, that means that this young man is now homeless because he can't pay the rent because his parents are no longer paying the rent for him. And I cannot even imagine the agony of a parent. As a parent, I can't imagine the agony knowing your child is living on the street. I can't imagine that, but that has worked. That has helped this kid to say, I'm sorry, I now understand, I need to turn over a new leaf and get my act together. I have no intervention that is reliably effective for an adult over 25 years of age. Sorry.
It's very true. So I think let's take one, maybe two more questions, and then we'll move into our kind of conclusion here. So I think this is something that many parents may relate to or struggle with, and that is actually having that conversation and being on the same page as parents when you are co-parenting. What if you have an issue where, you know, your spouse is not cooperating with the social media restrictions, or they themselves won't impose any restrictions on themselves? So this person has asked, should she go cold turkey on her husband as well? And ask him to. Yeah.
That's a very difficult situation. Divorce can be disastrous for kids. And I've seen this firsthand, and I understand why it can be disastrous. It's because the dynamics of a divorce often create a situation where there's a race to the bottom. Because say you have a 13-year-old child. Well, both parents know that the 13-year-old goes to the family law judge and says, hey, mom's mean and I love dad. Can I please spend more time with dad and less time with mom? Parents know that in all 50 states, the court will give considerable deference to the wishes of a teenage child. And in California, for sure, that judge may amend the custody arrangement and give the preferred parent more time. And that and other factors in a divorce can create, even putting the judge aside, there's tension between divorced parents. And no parent wants to hear their kids say, Dad's the nice guy, I love dad, I hate you. But if dad is letting the son stay up past midnight playing video games and lets the daughter do whatever she wants to on Instagram, and the mom is trying to limit, govern, and guide what kids are doing with their devices, it's very likely she's going to have a son and daughter saying, hey, we love dad, we hate you, you're the mean parent. And so she loosens up because she doesn't want to be the mean parent. And before you have what I call the race to the bottom. And both parents are letting kids do whatever they want. And this happens across domains where one parent's trying to get kids to eat vegetables and the other kid's just letting kids eat potato chips and ice cream. If the parents are not on board, the kids suffer. So I will bring the two parents into my office and I will say, don't look at each other and don't talk to each other. If you could accomplish anything by talking to one another, you wouldn't be divorced. So let's stipulate that nothing good can come of you talking at one another. Don't talk at one another, talk to me. Mom, let's hear your side. Dad, you wait, you'll get your turn. Mom, let's hear your concerns. And mom's just looking at me. I won't allow her even to look at dad, her ex. Just look at me. Okay, now thank you very much. Dad, it's your turn. Let's hear your side. The problem with a divorced couple, one of many problems, is that they have often lost the ability to converse. Conversations become arguments, and arguments become debates. In a debate, I'm listening to the other person only to find a chink in their armor, only to find a hole that I can attack. I'm not really listening as a friend or as an ally. I'm listening as an enemy when I'm debating. How can I attack this person's position? Where's the weak spot in their argument? By bringing them into my office and asking them to talk to me rather than to one another, one of the things I'm trying to accomplish is to allow them to hear what the other person is saying. Because I won't allow them to respond. You talk to me, now you talk to me. Don't argue with her, you talk to me. And by cutting the voice, the attacking between them, by encouraging them just to talk to me, hopefully they can hear for the first time in a long time what the other person is saying. And then hopefully I can begin to say, okay, let's see if we can just agree on some very simple fundamentals based not on what I think, but what on the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines say. The American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines say no devices in the bedroom. And they say that for a very good reason, which is that if there's a device in the bedroom, the kid's going to be up at any hour of the night. Can we just agree on that? Let's not talk about vegetables this visit. We'll do that maybe at the next visit. Let's just have some very limited objectives. Can we just agree on that one objective? No devices in the bedroom. And can you each understand that you must present a unified front on this? I'm not asking you to like one another. I'm asking you to love your kid. Your kid needs this from both of you. And if your kid is not getting this from both of you, it doesn't work. You must present a united front. It's a very challenging situation. I never bring it up unless it's asked in Q&A because it is one of the most difficult things I try to do, to get two parents who hate each other to agree to work together for the sake of their kids. They all will say in principle, oh, of course, we'll work together for the sake of our kids, but actually doing it is very difficult.
Absolutely. Well, I think, we've all really appreciated your talk today, Dr. Sachs, especially, the way that you combine mental health and psychology with physical health and wellness based on your background, I think is just really remarkable. Did you want to, share any last few gems of wisdom or concluding thoughts?
Sure.
Yeah.
Be courageous. one of the most common comments I get from parents is they're like, my kid will hate me. If I try to do half of what you're saying, my kid will hate me. And I don't want my kid to hate me. And none of the other parents are doing this. And what I say to that parent is, yes, they are. And I have spoken in Sacramento. I've spoken actually to Muslim parents in Sacramento. And I can tell you that some of your neighbors are doing this. Reach out to them. The Muslim community can help you to do this and help you to find other parents who share your beliefs, who share your convictions, that it is your job to do the right thing as a parent. Be of good courage. If both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, you will have a different family dynamic and a better family dynamic. Be courageous. The original title of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, was the original title. The title I sent to the publisher was The Collapse of American Parenting. And the subtitle was Why Most Kids Would Now Be Better Off Raised Outside North America. If your kid is a teenager in with a bad group of kids and all their friends are defiant and disrespectful and listening to the wrong music and watching the bad videos, you may need to move. And I'm not telling you to do anything we didn't do. We moved from Montgomery County, Maryland to Chester County, Pennsylvania, more than 3 hours away, sold my practice in Montgomery County, Maryland, found a new job in Pennsylvania because it was the right thing for our daughter. If you have to, you have to move. And another Muslim host said, this is not unfamiliar to Muslims, that Muslims know that if you have to leave. You have to do what is best for the family. But you probably won't have to move. You won't have to leave the United States. There are certainly communities that you can find in the United States that do support strong parenting. Hopefully you can find that community right where you are. But don't give up. In your heart, you know what's best for your kid. Do what's best for your kid. That will take courage. You can do it.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And I think that the fact that any of us, all of us showed up here today is just a testament to the fact that we are trying and we want to. And ultimately, we all love our children and our families, and we can do it. So with that, thank you so much, Dr. Sachs. I'm going to quickly just introduce our Chief Communications Officer, Sister Navera Sabir. She's an amazing, amazing individual. She does so much, goes above and beyond the scope of her work all the time as a volunteer in our community as well. So she's going to tell us a little bit about Tarbiyah and our programs, and also end with a concluding prayer. Go ahead, Navera.
Hello, assalamu alaikum all. Before you all sort of jump off here, thank you so much, Dr. Sachs. That was an incredibly enlightening program. You know, I only have one daughter and she's 2 years old, and I've told everyone that now I'm going to put her in a bubble. I'm going to go build that bubble after this this webinar shuts down. But just a little bit more about Tarbiyah Institute. I know our participants are sort of scattered all over, the nation. We have some people from Canada on today, which is really incredible. But if you are in the area, or you'd like to take advantage of some of our digital programming, we have 2 locations in Roseville and Sacramento. We offer a variety of virtual and in-person programming. Nowadays, more virtual, more that you can take advantage of. We offer programming for all the different groups of our community, which is something very unique and cool that our organization does. So from children as young as 2 years old to, seniors as old as 60, 80, we kind of do it all, which is fantastic. So we just wanted to wrap up with a quick prayer, if that's okay. Almighty God, the most merciful, the most gracious, we assemble here today in pursuit of knowledge, so that we may become better parents, and better courageous parents. We ask you on this day to bless us, to increase our wisdom, and to purify our intentions. We pray that through your grace, we gain the vision to see clearly, the courage to act rightly, the love to care for our children, and the strength to carry us through these challenging times. We pray to you, Lord, to enable us to be strong, righteous, wise parents and leaders within our families and communities. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to learn and grow, and we seek your blessing on this day. And thank you again, Dr. Sachs. And for anyone looking for more information on Third Via Institute, www.thirdvia.org.
Thank you so much, Navera, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Sachs.
All right, thank you. I'm going to sign off.
All right, everybody. We'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.